The bell above Mel's diner chimed weakly as Sarah pushed through the glass door, her younger brother Danny close behind her. The familiar smell of bacon grease and coffee hit them immediately, a scent that once meant comfort but now only reminded them of everything they'd lost. Sarah's worn sneakers squeaked against the black and white checkered floor as they made their way to the counter. The diner was nearly empty at this hour, just past 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Most people were at work or school, living normal lives that seemed impossibly distant now. "2 coffees, please," Sarah said to the waitress behind the counter, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her name tag read, Gloria. Danny slumped onto the red vinyl stool beside his sister, his oversized jacket hanging loosely on his thin frame. At 14, he'd grown 3 inches in the past year, but they hadn't been able to keep up with buying new clothes. Everything he wore belonged to someone else first. Donated items from the church, hand-me-downs from neighbors who knew their situation. "Make that 1 coffee and a hot chocolate," Sarah corrected, noticing how Danny's hands trembled slightly as he pulled them from his pockets. Whether from cold or nerves, she couldn't tell anymore. Gloria studied them for a moment, her experienced eye taking in the details that told their story. The way Sarah counted out change from a crumpled envelope, the dark circles under both their eyes, Danny's 2 big clothes, and Sarah's determined expression that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion beneath it. "Coming right up, honey," Gloria said gently, already reaching for the coffee pot. Sarah stared at the crumpled $20 bill in her hand, their last $20. Tomorrow, she'd have to choose between buying groceries or paying for another night at the motel where they'd been staying since the eviction. The math was simple and brutal. They couldn't afford both. 3 months ago, their world had been different. Not perfect, not easy, but stable. Their mother, Linda, had worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves at the grocery store during the day. It wasn't much, but it kept their small apartment, kept food on the table, kept Danny in school and Sarah in community college pursuing her nursing degree. Then came the diagnosis: stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The words had hit them like a physical blow, stealing the breath from their lungs and the ground from beneath their feet. The doctors spoke in terms of months, maybe weeks. Treatment options were limited, expensive, and ultimately futile. Linda had fought anyway. She'd fought with every ounce of strength in her diminishing body, not because she believed she could win, but because she couldn't bear the thought of leaving her children alone in the world. The medical bills had piled up like snow in a blizzard, each one higher than the last. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. Never enough. Sarah had dropped out of school to care for her mother and work extra shifts at the diner where she'd been waitressing part-time. Danny had tried to keep going to school, but it became impossible when they lost the apartment. Hard to explain to teachers why homework wasn't done when you didn't have a desk to do it on, or electricity to read by. Linda had died on a Tuesday, just like today. Sarah remembered because she'd been annoyed that it was raining, as if the weather should have recognized the significance of the day and provided something more dramatic. But it was just Tuesday, gray and ordinary, the kind of day that would have passed without notice if it hadn't taken their mother with it. That was 6 weeks ago. Gloria set the coffee and hot chocolate in front of them, along with a small plate of sugar cookies that Sarah was certain they hadn't ordered. When Sarah looked up questioningly, Gloria just winked and busied herself wiping down the already clean counter. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, the words catching in her throat. Such small kindnesses had become lifelines, moments of grace that reminded her that goodness still existed in a world that often felt cruel and indifferent. Danny wrapped his hands around the warm mug of hot chocolate, inhaling the sweet steam. For a moment, he looked like the child he still was, rather than the old soul he'd been forced to become. "Sarah," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "What are we going to do?" It was the question that haunted her every waking moment, the weight that pressed down on her chest and made breathing feel like work. She was 19 years old, legally an adult but feeling impossibly young and unprepared for the responsibility that had been thrust upon her. She was responsible for Danny now, his guardian, his provider, his only family. The social services people had been kind but clear. If Sarah couldn't provide stable housing for Danny, he'd have to go into the foster care system. They'd be separated, possibly permanently. The thought made her physically ill. "We'll figure it out," she said, the same answer she'd been giving for weeks. It was becoming harder to believe, but she couldn't let Danny see her doubt. He needed her to be strong, to have answers, to be the adult even when she felt like a child herself. "Mrs. Patterson said she might have some work for me," Danny offered, referring to their former neighbor who'd been helping them navigate the bureaucratic maze of their new reality. "Just cleaning out her garage and stuff. She said she could pay me $50. Sarah's heart clenched. Danny should be worried about homework and friends and whether the girl he liked would talk to him in the hallway. Instead, he was trying to figure out how to contribute to their survival. "That's good, but you need to focus on school," she said, though she knew how hollow it sounded. How could she tell him school was important when they didn't even have a permanent address? "I'm not stupid, Sarah," Danny said, and there was an edge to his voice that made her look at him sharply. "I know what's happening. I know we're broke. I know we might have to sleep in the car again tonight." The truth hung between them like smoke from the grill, acrid and unavoidable. They'd slept in their ancient Honda Civic twice in the past week when they couldn't scrape together enough for the motel. Sarah had parked behind a 24-hour Walmart, and they'd tried to sleep curled up in the backseat, sharing her old winter coat as a blanket. "It's temporary," Sarah said, but even she could hear how weak it sounded. "Is it?" Danny's voice cracked, and suddenly he was 14 again, scared and angry and trying not to cry. "Because it feels pretty permanent to me. It feels like this is our life now." Gloria had moved to the far end of the counter, giving them privacy while pretending to reorganize the pie display. But Sarah could feel her listening, could sense the woman's concern and sympathy like a presence in the room. "Danny, look at me." Sarah turned on her stool to face her brother fully. "I know it's hard. I know it seems impossible right now. But I'm not giving up, and neither are you. We're going to get through this." "How?" The question came out as almost a wail, and Danny pressed his hands against his eyes. "Mom's gone, Sarah. She's gone, and we're alone, and I don't understand how we're supposed to just keep going." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach because they echoed her own thoughts so perfectly. How were they supposed to keep going? How did people survive losses this enormous? How did the world just continue turning when everything that mattered had stopped? She thought about their mother's last words to her, whispered in the sterile hospital room with machines beeping and the smell of disinfectant making everything feel unreal. "Take care of each other," Linda had said. "You're stronger than you know. Stronger than you know." Sarah had repeated those words to herself countless times in the past 6 weeks, but right now, sitting in this diner with $20 to their name and nowhere to sleep tonight, she felt anything but strong. I miss her too, Sarah said softly, reaching over to put her hand on Danny's shoulder. Every single day, I miss her. And some days, I don't know how we're going to make it either. But we are, Danny. We're going to make it because we have to. Because she would want us to. Danny pulled his hands away from his eyes, and Sarah could see the tears he'd been trying to hide. Her little brother, who used to believe she could fix anything, who had trusted her completely to make everything okay. Now he was looking at her with doubt, with fear, with the knowledge that she might not be able to protect him after all. I'm scared, he whispered, and it was the most honest thing either of them had said in weeks. I'm scared too, Sarah admitted. I'm terrified. But we're scared together, okay? And as long as we're together, we can figure this out. Gloria approached them cautiously, carrying a fresh pot of coffee and a gentle expression. I hope you don't mind me saying, she said, refilling Sarah's cup without being asked, but I've been watching you too, and I can see you're going through a hard time. Sarah tensed, wondering if this was the moment someone would call social services, would try to help in a way that would only make things worse. But Gloria's next words surprised her. I lost my husband 2 years ago, Gloria continued, her voice steady but soft. Cancer too. Left me with 3 kids and more bills than I knew what to do with. I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. My manager's been looking for someone to work the early morning shift, 4 a.m. to noon. It's not glamorous work, but it pays decent, and the tips from the breakfast crowd can be pretty good. You interested? Sarah stared at her, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a chance, Gloria corrected. Rest is up to you. But I've seen how you handle yourself, how you look after your brother. That tells me something about your character. I don't have an address right now, Sarah said, the words feeling like an admission of failure. We're between places. Gloria nodded as if this was just another detail to work out, not a disqualifying factor. There's a boarding house about 6 blocks from here. Mrs. Chen rents rooms by the week, and she's good people. Let me give her a call, see if she's got something available. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but for the first time in weeks, they weren't tears of despair. Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us. Gloria smiled, and it transformed her face completely. Honey, I know everything I need to know. You're taking care of your brother, you're trying to keep your family together, and you haven't given up. That's enough for me. Danny looked up from his hot chocolate, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time in weeks. Does this mean we might have a real place to stay? It means we might, Sarah said carefully, not wanting to promise something that might fall through. But even the possibility felt like a gift. Gloria disappeared into the back to make her phone call, and Sarah and Danny sat in silence for a few minutes, processing this unexpected turn. The diner felt warmer somehow, more welcoming. The afternoon sun was slanting through the windows, casting long golden rectangles across the floor. Sarah, Danny said eventually, yeah, do you think Mom would be proud of us? I mean, for trying so hard to stay together. Sarah thought about their mother, about the sacrifices she'd made every day to keep their small family afloat. About how she'd worked herself to exhaustion just to make sure they had what they needed. About how she'd faced her diagnosis with more courage than Sarah thought she could ever possess. I think she'd be proud that we didn't give up, Sarah said. I think she'd be proud that we're still fighting. Gloria emerged from the back office with a smile on her face. "Good news," she announced. "Mrs. Chen has a room available, and when I told her about your situation, she said she'd take the first week's rent out of your first paycheck. You can start tomorrow morning if you want." Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. A job, a place to stay, a chance to rebuild their lives from the ground up. It wasn't going to be easy. Nothing about their situation was easy, but for the first time since their mother died, she could see a path forward. "Thank you," she said, and the words felt inadequate for what Gloria had just given them. "Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet," Gloria laughed. "Wait until you've worked a few 4 a.m. shifts and see how you feel then." As they prepared to leave the diner, Sarah carefully folded the $20 bill and put it back in the envelope. They'd need it for dinner and maybe a few groceries, but suddenly it felt like more than just their last $20. It felt like seed money for whatever came next. Outside, the afternoon was growing cool, but the sun was still shining. Danny walked beside her with more energy in his step than she'd seen in weeks, chattering about the boarding house and whether he'd be able to catch the bus to school from there. Sarah half listened, her mind already racing ahead to all the things she'd need to do. Call the social services caseworker and update them on the housing situation. Figure out how to get Danny enrolled in a new school. Start planning a budget based on what Gloria thought she could make at the diner. But underneath the practical concerns, there was something else: hope. Fragile and tentative, but real. They had a chance now, a foothold on a cliff they'd been sliding down for weeks. It wasn't a guarantee. There would still be struggles, still be days when $20 felt like nothing, still be nights when they missed their mother so badly it felt like drowning. But they were going to make it. Somehow, against all odds, they were going to survive this. They were going to stay together, and they were going to build something new from the ashes of everything they'd lost. As they walked toward their uncertain but slightly brighter future, Sarah thought again of her mother's last words: "You're stronger than you know." Maybe she was right. Maybe strength wasn't about never being scared or never doubting yourself. Maybe it was about keeping going anyway, about finding the courage to accept help when it was offered, about protecting the people you loved even when you weren't sure you could protect yourself. The boarding house was 6 blocks away, but for the first time in months, the distance didn't seem impossible to cross. They had each other, they had a chance, and they had learned that sometimes, when everything falls apart, strangers become family and $20 can feel like all the money in the world. Tomorrow, Sarah would start over. She'd put on the uniform Gloria would give her, she'd learn the early morning routines of the diner, and she'd begin the slow work of rebuilding their lives. Danny would start at a new school, would make new friends, would slowly begin to believe in the future again. It wouldn't be the life they'd planned, wouldn't be the life they'd had with their mother. But it would be theirs, earned through determination and kindness and the refusal to give up when giving up would have been easier. The sun was setting as they reached Mrs. Chen's boarding house, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day was ending, but somehow, it felt like a beginning too. They climbed the front steps together, 2 kids who'd grown up too fast but hadn't grown up alone, ready to start the next chapter of their story. Sarah knocked on the door, Danny beside her, their last $20 still folded in her pocket like a promise that tomorrow, they would have 21.